online, on the TuneIn app,
and on your smart speaker.
Play Shock Radio.
This is the sound of Salford.
Shock Radio News.
This is your Shock Radio News show with Alfie Garner and Ben Cook. The headlines at just gone 7 o'clock. A head teacher has paid tribute to a 12-year-old boy who has been stabbed to death on his way home from a school in Birmingham, saying he was absolutely adored. Leo Ross was attacked in a park yesterday evening. Police are questioning a 14-year-old boy. Prince Harry's lawyers have called for the investigation by police and Parliament after he settled his legal battle with the Sun's publisher. The News Group UK newspaper division has issued what it calls a full and unequivocal apology over the serious intrusion. Donald Trump has called the war in Ukraine ridiculous and issued an ultimatum to Vladimir Putin to end it. The new US president has warned he'll have no choice but to impose sanctions and tariffs on Russia if it doesn't make a peace deal. An amber weather warning has been issued ahead of storm. Forecasters say it could endanger life. Storm Orion is expected to batter the UK on Friday. And Sting has pulled out of an award ceremony performance and several shows this week on doctor's orders. The British singer has blamed illness for the cancellation but has not revealed any details.
Shock Radio weather.
Dry with clear spells developing this evening, allowing for rural frost and patchy fog to form overnight. Cloudy in the west with patchy light rain for some, light winds for most, but becoming more breezy along the west coast by the morning. A low of 3 degrees in Manchester. Well, this is your Shock Radio News show with Alfie Garner and Ben Cook. A lot to discuss today, but hello to you, Ben. How are you?
Hey, Alfie. Nice to be back. How are you?
I'm not too bad today, not too bad. Plenty to discuss. Let's start in the US, where earlier this week, Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States, where he said he would declare a national emergency on the border of Mexico and vowed to unify Americans. He used his speech to declare the golden age of America begins now. On his first day, he ended up signing 25 executive orders, including an order to withdraw the US from the World Health Organization and the Paris Agreement. What can we take from his inauguration? What can we take from the ceremony? Because it was inside for the first time, but along the day, what did you expect, and did that sort of carry through in the overall proceedings?
Well, the fact he was even being inaugurated in the first place is the political comeback of maybe all time. We're seeing a convicted felon and someone who's been, involved in hush money scandals, and not to mention his criminal past, but someone who's survived an assassination attempt. Like he was lucky to be at the inauguration. There was so much. I'm gonna start with fashion. I think Melania Trump's outfit was all of her inauguration looks, bar some, were all black and white, which I thought, is this sort of a statement? Is she trying to make a statement? And I've been reading today that Ivanka Trump, her sort of green outfit, I think it was by Christian Dior maybe, but it was sort of, it was very remnant of outfits that we've seen from shows like The Handmaid's Tale. And obviously with the wide-scale abortion bans that are being proposed across America, people are saying, is that owed to something? But just to get that out the way, it very much was Donald Trump saying, when the country is an absolute mess. Every, ex-president and outgoing President Joe Biden sitting here in front of me has been an absolute disaster, and I am the saviour, and I am here, and God spared me, and and he didn't die via his assassination attempts because it's his divine right that he is going to save America. It was sort of, he's a showman, isn't he? And it was a performance. It was very brazen of him to he insulted the Bidens a lot, didn't he, at the inauguration? There was no we've seen sort of outgoing presidents and president-elects and presidents being inaugurated, sort of, when say the handover between the Bushes and the Obamas, and, very peaceful, very, very sort of above board. I thought it was crazy to see, every media mogul billionaire, being on the front row. We had Elon Musk, we had Jeff Bezos, we had Zuckerberg. It just looked like a lot of celebrities. It was like an inauguration that we'd never ever seen before.
Absolutely, and you talked there about who was on that front row, who was in the inauguration, because we obviously saw former presidents, as is tradition, but we also saw the ex-UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and, as you said, Elon Musk, but also other tech billionaires.
Yeah.
Is this going to suggest we're going to see a massive shift of what the powers of the US? Because we did discuss before Christmas that this cabinet within the US is looking to be one of money power rather than political power throughout the next 4 years.
Yeah. Well, for someone who, sort of enunciates at every chance that he gets that he's so, that he's sort of not a poster boy, but he's such an advocate for the working man. All he seems to be interested in doing is shaking the hands of billionaires and tech billionaires. He's urging Elon Musk to buy TikTok if that's something that Elon wants to do. So, yeah, I do think, Donald Trump is... he doesn't think like a politician. I think he thinks like a businessman. And I think it shows in the people that he surrounds himself with.
Well, this is what Mr. Trump had to say in his first inauguration speech, his first speech as the new president.
The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society.
So he talked there about the mass support he got back in November when he did wipe out a lot of the what we would expect to be blue states in the US. But it does, and that does come to call how popular he is, even though he had them 2 assassination attempts, even though, poll-wise he wasn't popular. But when it came to the Electoral College, he was very popular in the policies he declared, the policies that he announced, but also his persona is one of popularity, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think that Donald Trump is viewed as a character who can get things done. And I think that's what the Americans were absolutely crying out for. I mean, we had Joe Biden, who, arguably didn't know where he was or who he was addressing a lot of the time, which is just not... it just would not make you feel secure in a leader of your country. So, yeah, I think, Donald Trump's seen as a man who's going to come in, he's going to do the job. I will say, in Donald Trump's last term in office, he did say a lot of things that he was going to do that didn't end up happening. He's a bit sometimes like a dog who barks a lot, but then doesn't bite. But he does talk a good talk. So this second term, he's got a lot more power this second term. He's got most of the Senate. As you said, he wiped out a lot of blue states, so he's standing very, very strongly. I just want to say, just running back to the inauguration, and he did... I'll just preface what I was saying before about how much he sort of insulted a lot of, like the Democrat leaders. He said at one point, Hillary doesn't look happy, and then there was points where he was saying that he wanted to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and Hillary was laughing. The Clintons and Obamas both got booed. But to be fair, Joe Biden has left Donald Trump with a fairly strong economy, and I'm not going to totally say strong and let that stand on its own. Joe Biden recovered the American economy a lot better and faster than the UK were able to do post-pandemic, and there's a fairly stable job market in America, and there was a lot of the Biden administration made things a lot easier for minorities. So, I do just want to say, there was a lot of holes in the Biden administrations, and, the pardons that Joe Biden made on his sort of last day, including his own family members, he even pardoned Hunter Biden before Christmas. And I did think that was all very sneaky, just as he's slipping out of the side door. I think the pardons were announced as he was, as the Bidens were having tea with the Trump couple, as before the inauguration, as is tradition. So I didn't like that. I thought it was very sneaky, and I thought it was a way that Joe Biden could leave, and he's sort of irrelevant now, isn't he? Because there's so much buzz around Trump. So I think it's a way that he thought he could maybe save his reputation for the history books. So the point I'm making is there was a lot of holes in the Biden administration. I don't even think Joe Biden was mentally competent to be the leader of the free world. But it weren't all bad. I think Donald Trump is being a little bit dramatic in the whole "I've come to save you all from mass destruction."
Well, yeah, that is something we did see in the sort of last few weeks of the Biden administration. He did force through a lot of executive orders, one of them being his climate policy, which is probably bound to see written off straight away by Donald Trump. He did do similar back in 2017 when he took over from Obama. But what we are seeing in America is a very much shift between personality towards a personality style politics rather than a history old politics, where we are going to see a massive change in not only the political landscape but how politics works around the world, because it will start to affect how we run politics here in the UK and also in other countries. We'll go on to the international reaction in a little bit. Let's take a listen to Donald Trump taking the oath in Washington.
And will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
So that was Donald Trump taking the oath to become president, which has become that tradition, but also the rapturous applause that he received at the end. He got that throughout the inauguration, especially in that speech from before, where he sort of had the fans calling out to him saying, this is what we want, but also certain aspects of that were in the room with the people who will have the most power over the next sort of 4 years, because it will depend on how he runs this term, whether or not the Republicans will get back in 2028, won't it?
Well, it could go one of two ways. I mean, Donald Trump might, we're 2 days in, and to say we're 2 days into the second Trump term is crazy because it feels like we're about 2 weeks into it. But it's either going to go one of two ways. Donald Trump is either going to get done everything that he said he's going to get done, and a lot of people who have voted on him on the merit of what he said, on his campaign trail, they're going to be happy about that. Or we are going to see, an absolute uproar in America in terms of the opposition, because they're not going to stand for closing in on rights of LGBTQ plus people and the mass deportations where parents could be separated from children. There's nothing like sort of, a regime that people find somewhat tyrannic, and I'm not saying it's going to be, but I'm going to say if it is, to make people rise up and really the opposition to come back stronger than ever.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to see that massive influence that it will have sort of over the next couple of years, especially as, he settles back in and makes those executive orders. One of the people who were in the audience on the inauguration was Elon Musk, who is now part of the Department for Government Efficiency, or DOGE, as he likes to call it. But he will have a major influence over the next 4 years because of the power he has owning X or Twitter. Will we see Elon Musk sort of kind of carry through Donald Trump and influence what he has to say amongst other things within the next 4 years?
I think there's sort of a feeling that, they are going to be quite a destructive duo, or either they're going to have a big falling out. I can see both things happening. I've heard a lot of people over the last few days saying, it's just a matter of time before they absolutely come to blows, and it's going to be epic. There's a lot of people, in Trump's cabinet last term that, towards the end of his presidency were not, further endorsing him. Where Elon Musk is concerned, I think it's quite scary how we have America, which is such a powerful country anyway, and, sort of the most powerful in the cabinets, sort of control a lot of the rhetoric, because Elon Musk owns X. We've got Zuckerberg owning Facebook, and it's just a lot. They are very influential characters, and they can filter through whatever they like. And we know, Alfie, in the age of disinformation, and especially a lot of American Trump supporters, can't always decipher what's the truth and what is sort of a government rhetoric. But Elon Musk seems to be absolutely obsessed with UK politics at the minute, which is quite crazy, isn't it? I mean, he's been very vocal over Keir Starmer reopening the sort of investigations into the Rochdale grooming gangs. He's expressed interest in the fact that he might want to buy Liverpool Football Club. He thinks that our government should be overthrown. I mean, he's absolutely obsessed, and I don't really know where that's come from, but we are going to talk about the special relationship between England and America and what this means sort of for it, because that to me is I can't wait to see how this plays out now.
Absolutely, and we did talk about Elon Musk getting into UK politics in last week's Shock News show, which you can catch up on Mixcloud and on Shock TV. Let's have a listen to what Elon Musk said during the inauguration about Donald Trump, and also what he thinks will happen next.
Sorry, little X just followed me on the stage here. We're looking forward to making a lot of changes. This victory is the start, really.
So that's what Musk said. It was very quite interesting speech, because during the last bit of the speech, it was clipped up and put online, and many people saw a salute he did towards the end, which many people sort of used that to categorise what the next sort of 4 years will be about, didn't they?
Yeah. And he was also sitting next to Barron Trump, and he was very reserved and sort of respectful throughout the whole ceremony. And Musk, he just seemed a bit like, an excitable puppy, and it was a bit cringe. And it was just, and obviously the salute was questionable, weren't it? I mean, it just smells of, we are billionaires and we can do what we want. Everyone, it's sort of everyone, most people in that situation who have been in politics for years and years, they have a respect for tradition, they have a respect for ceremony. Even I'd say that the Bidens and the Clintons, even apart from Hillary, breaking into laughter at some points, they were respectful because they do really uphold the Constitution of America, and they know, what inaugurations, it was in the Capitol, the first one in there for years and years, obviously because of the cold in Washington. I think the only one that was held indoors was Ronald Reagan's all those years ago. And then we sort of seen, all of this media mogul billionaires lined up, and they were just, in the sort of way they were acting and the body language, it was just reinforcing the rhetoric of brashness of, we can do whatever we want when we want.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of international reaction to the inauguration yesterday. The King sent a message of congrats to Mr. Trump, while Keir Starmer reflected on Trump's long-standing affection for the UK. Meanwhile, though, the London Mayor's not so keen. Sadiq Khan warned of a resurgence in fascism. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy said that the government is looking forward, though, to working with the Trump administration.
We have a special relationship with the United States. It doesn't matter who's in the White House or number 10, and we look forward to working with Donald Trump over the next 4 years.
So it does suggest that even though we've got a relatively centre government here in the UK and they're more of a right-wing government over in the US, it suggests that the government here just going to work to get the best for the UK, doesn't it? It looks more like a diplomatic rather than political fight.
Yeah, so Alfie, I'm absolutely intrigued about what the special relationship is going to bring, because I can't picture it. I don't know what it will look like. I think, again, a lot of this boils down to personality. I think Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, they are two guys that if they walked into a pub, they just would not get on. We've got Keir Starmer, who's very serious. He's Mr. Play by the rules. We've got Donald Trump, who's the complete opposite. The thing about Donald Trump is he's got a lot of pizzazz and he has got that showman quality, and Keir Starmer, doesn't have any of that. So I think it's a personality clash. I think as well. I mean, I would say, in my opinion, you know what I mean, that in America we have more of a far right government, and I would say that in England we have a centre left. So I think, again, different ends of the political spectrum. And obviously that is open to interpretation. I just hope. I mean, it was very telling that Keir Starmer was not at the inauguration, but two past Conservative opposition prime ministers were there. We had Liz Truss there. We had Boris Johnson there. We also had Suella Braverman there. I thought that was very telling. We had Nigel Farage there. I mean, Donald Trump is closer to Nigel Farage and seems to endorse him more than he does to our actual Prime Minister. There's a lot of Donald Trump just ignoring Keir Starmer, I think, just trying to put like a band-aid over him and pretending that, he sort of just isn't relevant. And I don't know what this means for this special relationship. And I mean, both countries are going to be looking towards a trade deal, aren't they? And Donald Trump has said that he is not going to be afraid to put high tariffs on imports coming out of America to all EU countries, because he said in his words that the EU hasn't always been good to America, or something along those lines, including sort of imports coming into Great Britain that our government will not be a fan of. I think we were negotiating a trade deal with Biden. I think that got paused last May. So that is up in the air. So I think that is definitely going to be a contender. But we've always had such a special relationship with America. I mean, the UK and America have always worked in tandem. What I do think might sort of save our relationship is Donald Trump is a big royalist. He really does like the royal family. I mean, at the opening of Notre Dame, which was hosted by Emmanuel Macron, he also met with Prince William during his time in Paris. He absolutely loved the Queen. His parents or grandparents were Scottish, so he's got ties to Great Britain. That might be the reason why he does want to continue that, but there's clearly a disconnect between him and Keir Starmer, and I think it's insane that there seems to be more of a closeness between opposition parties than the Labour Party who sort of run our government right now.
Well, you mentioned there about the trade deal that the UK and the US will probably during this Parliament have to discuss to ensure that we can at least get a best deal that we can. Today during PMQs, Ed Davey raised the question of whether we'll let animal welfare sort of affect that trade deal, whether Keir Starmer would let Donald Trump sort of influence that. He said he fears that farmers will get the short end of the stick, that the strong standards that we have in the UK will go missed and will cause issues. The Prime Minister has said no matter what the trade deal happens, he essentially said no matter what trade deal we achieve, we will make sure it's the best quality and the best that our standards don't go to waste. Let's go more around the world as well, because Donald Trump has also issued an ultimatum to Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine. He called it ridiculous online and threatened high levels of tax and tariffs and sanctions unless the Russian leader Vladimir Putin made a deal soon. He had previously pledged to end the war on his first day of presidency. What does this mean for sort of international conflict? Do we see Donald Trump as the figure to sort of fix this? Because he has claimed credit for the ceasefire in Gaza, which was announced on Sunday, and we'll come back onto it a little bit later. Will we see this sort of Donald Trump figure of, I'm the one who can fix these international conflicts?
Well, just touching on what you said there, I think, I'm not going to say who's at credit for the ceasefire deal, but I think it's something the Biden administration were working on for a long time, and Donald Trump sort of swooned in, took the credit. I'm not saying he's completely, creditless, but I also think, in Joe Biden's sort of final address, when he was talking a lot about the ceasefire and how he's made it happen, I think he sort of just focused on the wrong things because, as I said, he's left a fairly stable economy and job market. As far as Trump urging Putin to end the ridiculous war, I mean, it's quite insulting, isn't it, to say to a big president like Putin, this is ridiculous, to diminish what's been going on to ridiculous. And it was a move that shocked me. I didn't think that Trump, it just shows Trump is fearless. He does not, at the end of the day, I think he does respect Putin, whether he's right or wrong too, but I think Donald Trump is always of an opinion that I am the top dog. Do you know what I mean? In all forms of international relation. I was very shocked that he urged Putin to end the war, and maybe actually not to end the war, because he said he could end the war in a day or whatever or less. But I was very shocked that he put an ultimatum on him. He said it would result in sanctions and higher tariffs Donald Trump really does seem to be throwing the tariffs around, though, doesn't he? Because I think he's mentioned that with China, he's looking towards a sort of 10% trade tariff, which supposedly China would be happy about because it was a lot less than the 60% that was sort of banded around. It shocked me.
Yeah, that was the big thing during his campaign, though. It was a lot about the tariffs and, trying to get money for the US and keep US produce within the US and keep people buying from the US. We can only wait and see what happens with all that. Let's carry on with Gaza, as we said before, because Donald Trump did take credit for the ceasefire. But since the ceasefire was enacted on Sunday, almost 2,500 aid trucks have entered Gaza. Much needed humanitarian aid for Palestinians was amongst those conditions set within the United Nations, confirmed there's been no reports of looting. Further hostages from Israel are due to be freed on Saturday in return for a dozen more Palestinian prisoners. There were celebratory scenes in the occupied West Bank as people started to arrive home.
We maintain our right to resume the war, if necessary, with the backing of the U.S. And all senior officials of the American administration have all testified, have all said that it is the Hamas who provided obstacles to the negotiations.
Apologise, that might have been the wrong clip there. I think that was the response to the UN reaction to the war. Let's see if this is the right one.
The holiday is coming after Ramadan, but today is the holiday coming before Ramadan. Everybody happy here.
We're feeling stressed with joy, with happy. Like, we can't describe these feelings. It's incredible.
So that was the reaction in the occupied West Bank to people arriving home after the ceasefire began on Sunday. It was met with some delay after the Israeli cabinet couldn't decide and couldn't agree, and it took a little delay, but eventually the Israeli security forces said, yes, let's carry on. What does this mean, ceasefire-wise? What does it mean for the war in Gaza? And does it mean that we are going to see an eventual end to the wars in the Middle East?
Well, I think, I don't think anyone can say at this stage that it could be immediate end, but I think it is definitely 10 steps in the right direction. I think it's the closest we've come to it ending in the last 15 months. I think for the Palestinians, I think it is just, right now we're in the second day of the ceasefire, and I think it is just absolute relief. I think they're all just breathing, and we're seeing, and then you can't even imagine to put yourself in their shoes, because we're seeing a lot of Palestinians return home for the first time in a long time. And not only are they returning home and all of the emotions that are attached to that, they're seeing their sort of city absolutely wiped out. And then, of course, there's a search for 10,000 bodies, because, people's sons, daughters, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they're going to want to, find them, give them respectful burials. So there's a lot of emotion tied to that as well. I mean, they're probably in a state of pure joy because, they haven't known life without an air raid or looting in over a year. So, the quietness must be absolutely, telling, there. I can't even imagine what the atmosphere is like. I think, it is, I just think these people need this. They need this time.
Absolutely, and we've seen over the last sort of few days the release of some hostages. 3 Israeli hostages has been released, including a 28-year-old British-Israeli dual national, Emily Damari, as well as 90 Palestinian prisoners being released, all women and children. I think you put it rightly, you put it correctly there. It is all about, for people in Gaza, getting back home and getting back to where they feel comfortable, where they haven't got to fear a further attack. And a lot of them will be now hoping that this ceasefire is going to sort of start to relax tensions between Hamas and Israel. All we can do is watch on, see what happens in the Middle East, and we'll keep reporting for sure on this on Shock News. Let's move a bit closer to home, because earlier last week, Alfie Garner pled guilty to the murder of 3 girls Following that, the Prime Minister has stated he wants to make it harder for under 18s to buy knives on the internet. It comes as Amazon has started an urgent investigation after it was found that the knife that Rukabana used was bought off the platform. The Prime Minister, during PMQ today, vowed to crack down on knife sales online.
It is unacceptable that these murder weapons can be bought with 2 clicks. Technology is there to stop it, and we're going to take action.
So that's what the Prime Minister said in the Commons earlier today. The legislation that he wishes to bring in would include a 2-step verification on any purchase, which would look at an ID check and a video check to ensure that the person being ID'd is the right person. Would this be the right move to sort of reducing knife crime, both in the UK, but also murder, these unfortunate and sad murders around the UK as well?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely the right move. I don't know if it's the move that's going to stop knife crime, but it's one that absolutely needs it to happen, and it needs to happen immediately. I mean, the perpetrator, Rukabana, he was able to buy a knife on Amazon, have it delivered to his door, show one type of ID, and that's not really, that foolproof. I mean, there's ways around, everyone knows that what goes on with sort of fake IDs, and he was able to get it delivered to the house, and then he was able to go and take the life of 3 helpless, innocent, little girls. So I think Amazon 100% need to look at how accessible knives are. I mean, he was very easily able to get that knife. I think it's absolutely heartbreaking. I think Amazon is one of the, it has a part to play in this, but there were so many systematic errors that have slipped through the net. I mean, this guy was he was things that happened in school. He'd been reported to so many services across the UK, prevention. In school, it became sort of known to officials in 2019, that he suffered anxiety and isolation, trouble and behaviour. He took a knife into the Range High School in Formby. This was in 2019. That led him to be expelled. He's attended specialist schools. The police had repeated contact with him. This is around May 2022, responding to 5 calls from his home in Lancashire about his behaviour, and each time vulnerable child referrals were made. So this has been, someone known to a lot of services, and it's slipped through so many nets, so many different services that just weren't working to the full potential. So this has to be looked at across the board, because this was an absolute atrocity and it was too easily allowed to happen. So I think that, Keir Starmer has said, that, absolute immediate sort of measures are going to be put in place, and that's what needs to happen. The knife sort of epidemic, whatever you want to call it, in Britain is absolutely out of control. I mean, I've heard about 3 this week. Do you know what I mean? And it's utterly heartbreaking. It's lives that don't need to be lost. There needs to be a big crackdown. And also, there's blurred lines now between what sort of is terrorism, because we see terrorism as sort of, organised entities by the likes of Al-Qaeda. Many would argue that this was an act of terrorism, the sort of the terror that he did cause. He was sort of, he's been found with a lot of, a detailed history of Nazi sort of Nazi paperwork, whatever you would call it. So this is someone who has an obsession with violence and was prone to extremism.
Yeah, I would just say at the moment is that police have not currently classed this attack as terror-related on police and personal level. I would also just, coming back to what you said, he was previously referred to the Prevent Anti-Terror Programme, and we found out during the trial. Yvette Cooper called the programme vital for the national security, but said changes were vital as well to keep it running. She added that the Prevent framework for assessment was launched in September, and that Lord David Anderson was appointed as the interim Prevent Commissioner. What we will see come from that we'll have to wait for, but what we're also seeing is sort of this systematic change within the UK of how this is happening, where this is coming from, and further trials and bound to be inquiries about the issues surrounding this will almost come about this because, we just had a story today about the 12-year-old boy in Birmingham who was stabbed to death. So there's a lot to unpack here and a lot to sort of uncover, and that would only come by through sort of investigation from many sources.
I think, again, public services are just in a mess, and, there were so many missed opportunities, and it probably isn't the people working for these services' fault. They are probably overworked, underpaid, and did not have the resources to deal with this properly. But this has to be the lesson, because this was years and years and years of missed signals. This weren't just one referral that sort of, slipped in the back of someone's junk mail. This was a huge systematic error.
Well, it is something that we're going to keep looking at over the sort of course of the next few weeks to really see the changes that could happen to both the PREVENT programme, but also wider society. But we have almost come to the end of today's programme, but let's get a quick reminder of your headlines at just gone 25 to 8. A head teacher of a 12-year-old boy who was stabbed to death in Birmingham has described the boy as a bright and adored. The 14-year-old boy is being questioned by police over the death of Leo Ross in Hull Green yesterday. A group who campaign for press reform are calling Prince Harry's settlement with the News Group newspapers a humiliating day for the Sun. Following a lengthy High Court battle, the Duke of Sussex has been given an apology and damages. Donald Trump told Vladimir Putin to end what he calls the ridiculous war in Ukraine. The US president urged the Russia leader to make a peace deal or face a series of taxes, tariffs and sanctions. Politicians in Ireland have failed to select a new prime minister following last month's general election. A vote will now take place tomorrow after today's sitting ended in a row of over speaking time. And Brandon McCullen's first match in charge of England's limited overs cricket team ended in a heavy 7-wicket defeat in their opening T20 against India. Captain Josh Butler top scored with 68 as his side were bowled out of 132. Tonight's weather dry with clear spells developing overnight, allowing for rural frost and patchy fog overnight as well. Cloudier in the west with patchy light rain for some, light winds for most, but becoming breezy along the west coast. That was your Shock Radio News Show with Alfie Garner and Ben Cook. This week's edition was produced by Alfie Garner and Luke Jones and directed for Shock TV by Josh Bingham. Your Shock Radio News updates return tomorrow during breakfast.
This is Shock